Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nick Pettis, and I'm joined by Cynthia Carrillo and Professor Smith and Doctor Who. So, we have a couple questions we would like you guys to answer. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. Being a woman in America, how does it feel to have a say in who runs your government?
So the question is, how does it feel to have meaning how does it feel to have a say? Like, how does it feel to have a vote?
Yes, basically, yeah.
It feels awesome. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, like it's a beautiful thing, right? Like having ensured political participation under the government under which you exist and which you are subject. Like it's only right. It's your natural right to have that kind of political participation. So suffrage is good. Suffrage is real awesome.
How about you, Professor Smith?
Like Morgan, I can't imagine perhaps life without it. And it's interesting that I've spent so much of my career studying women who never had it and what their lives looked like trying to fight for their own political autonomy, their own individuality economically, not because they don't love men, but because they want what Morgan and I both are so happy to have, the ability to influence our government. And whether we are heard or not in the election count by winning, we know that we can contribute on some level. It also causes a lot of fights, over politics within the household and families. But I say that, and I'm pretty sure it did anyways with women when they weren't voting as well. Just because women couldn't doesn't mean they weren't trying to influence the men in their lives on politics as well. So it's exciting.
Thank you. How does it feel to have a woman vice president?
Do you want to go first, Tammy?
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled beyond words. I was happy to see Hillary Clinton on a major ticket. Not because I would say that I'm like the grandest Hillary Clinton fan, but it was showing this progression of women on the national scene in politics. And now with VP Harris, to have gotten that foot into the door, I would have liked to see a woman in the top seat, don't get me wrong. But I think I understand the political system enough that usually with women it's baby steps, or one step forward, two steps backs, we like to say in politics in women's history, right, Morgan? And we might get a shove back after this, but I don't think we're going anywhere for the long term. So it's exciting. And we have so many women in the Supreme Court, more women in the House of Representatives than ever before on both sides of the aisle. We need to get a few more in as senators and governors, I would think, for sure, some on the local level too.
I completely concur. I confess that when I watched Hillary Clinton's acceptance speech for the Democratic nomination in 2016, I cried. Yes. I cried like a baby, knowing how long women have fought for the right to vote and what a difficult journey and what a difficult battle it was to get there. And now for a woman to be nominated to the ticket of a major party in 2016, or to the top spot in the ticket of a major party in 2016 was incredibly moving for me. And I'm so incredibly proud because I have a baby daughter. And so when Kamala Harris was giving her speech accepting the VP nomination, after they won, after it was declared that they won, I like propped up my baby girl so she could like watch the TV screen, so she could watch Kamala Harris give her speech. And it was incredibly moving. I remember I asked my mother once, my mother raised me feminist, and she always told me about the history of the women's movement. And I remember when I was a little kid, I asked her once if she thought that she would ever see a woman president during her lifetime. And she said no. And she's in her 70s now. And my hope is that we can get that, we can get there for her, so she can see that in her lifetime. And I think that would be really incredible.
Yeah, I love that you held the baby up to the screen, because one of the great things when I was younger with the kids, I would stack them into like a triple stroller to have to walk down on the south side of Chicago to go vote. And I'd always take my kids. And now with California, you get to vote at home. When I voted for Hillary Clinton, I not only had my daughter next to me, but all of my sons, because to me, it was such a big deal to be able to check that box. And the same with Harris. And my daughter, it was her first election to vote in, was to be able to vote for a woman. And I'm 51, had to wait to that point to get to it. And she was 19. And your daughter will only know women.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a difference that will be. Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember reading that Vice President Harris was on the presidential election ticket. Was I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that's how a presidential election ticket works. Yeah.
All right. Good. You both are history professors. Could you tell us a little bit about the Seneca Falls Convention?
I'm going to go on that one.
Sure. So in 1848, well, actually, where should I start? Okay. So here's the deal. In American colonial history and in United States history, there was a long there is a long history of women's lack of access not only to the political realm, but to also social equality and economic equality. And there are many, 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 many things that I could talk about. And I would invite you and invite your listeners to take, for example, U.S. women's history with either Professor Smith or me. And you can learn all about that in much more specifics, but there's a long history of not only lack of access to the political sphere, but economic access, social inequality, like literal legal violence against women. And so by 1848, there is a growing acknowledgement that these things are not okay. And this is largely born out of American women's understanding of the anti-slavery movement. So the anti-slavery movement really focused on how it was African Americans were, they did not have access to the right to vote. They were not considered citizens. It was legal to beat them, literally legal even to murder them. They did not have access to money. And as women were fighting for the rights of enslaved people not to be treated that way and for their freedom, they started to look around at their own condition and go like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Like a lot of these things that we're noticing about the condition of the enslaved, those are actually similar things that are happening to us. Women did not have, for example, the right to their own wages. Their wages belonged to their husband. They did not have a right to sign contracts in their own name, a right to own their own businesses. It was legal in places for husbands to beat their wives, not murder their wives, but to beat them. And so women are seeing connections then between the things that they're fighting for African Americans and the fact that they also don't have access to those same things in their own lives. And so in 1848, the work of extraordinary people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton put together a conference. Basically, it was to lay out all of these things that they had noticed were unequal about the treatment of women, and to just sort of like lay it out there and put it out there. And as part of the Seneca Falls Convention, they wrote a document called the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. And the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments, in essence, was basically like a just point blank list of like, women don't have access to this, women don't have access to this, women don't have access to this. All we are calling for, we're not calling for special treatment. All we are calling for is to be treated as citizens under the law who are entitled to all of these things. And that includes the right to vote. And this was a profoundly important moment in American history. It was a profoundly important moment in women's history for everyone all around the world. Like, this was just a foundational moment. It ultimately led to the movement that fought specifically for women's access to the vote.
Wow, she's good.
I was about to say.
That's just rattling off without any notes. And I feel bad. Like, I want to give you all the specifics. Like, here's all the specific laws and stuff I'm talking about, but take the class.
All right.
Yeah.
This is my last question, and then Cynthia, you can ask yours. Knowing about what the women who came before you did to earn your right to vote, is there anything you would like to tell our women viewers about voting?
I'll start that one, because if anybody's out there listening who's had me on, they've heard me say, my biggest frustration is to see young women and other populations not vote. I understand the disconnect many times over the Electoral College, or this sense that your vote doesn't count, but we still have to show and be counted, because there are definitely people who would like to see those votes taken away from us again. And I think this last election has plenty of examples of states who are coming back with very harsh restrictions to limit certain voices from being a part of future elections in their state. And this is a historical pattern. And if we don't consistently keep showing up, regardless of who you're voting for, in large numbers, there will be people who will be happy to take that away from us. And that disturbs me, because if you just want to go back to 15th Amendment with men, all men having the right to vote, and then you enter into Jim Crow and all of the restrictions that were placed on it, and knowing the fight from the early suffragettes to the women like Alice Paul, who will finish it off in the progressive era with the 19th Amendment in 1919, and how violently they were treated by the US government for their civil disobedience, for simply their free speech to say that this is wrong, that women aren't voting, and the thousands over the years who have been disenfranchised by restrictions on state levels, whether for literacy tests and grandfather clauses and voter ID restrictions, and now mail-in ballot conversations and controversies. Do we want our voices to be heard, or are we going to let them be silenced? And I would say, please, please, please show up. And especially younger voters as well. Older people probably hope you don't show up, because generationally, usually the votes don't go together or don't gel per se. And that's a problem too. So all generations, all people of America, we all need to be heard on that aspect. Morgan, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna lie. I'm a huge movie buff, you guys. And whenever I think about anything, usually like my brain immediately goes to a movie. And so I actually want to reference a 2004 movie called Iron-Jawed Angels. And I want to quote from that movie. So I want to be clear. I am not this articulate and this wonderful. I'm 100% stealing this from this amazing movie called Iron-Jawed Angels. In the film, one of the other characters is trying to convince someone to to fight for women's right to vote. And she says, your vote is your voice. Your vote is your voice. And if you are unhappy about the American political system, if you are unhappy with things that have been happening in the news in the last couple of years, and you want to make that known, how you do that is through the vote. No, you will not always win, because you will not always, the causes that you want will not always win, because unfortunately, like, that's just the way the political system works. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't, but that's not a reason to give up. If you care about what is happening in your country, if you care about what is going to happen in the future, the only way that you will make that known is through voting. And so your voice, or I've already forgotten the quote. The vote is your voice, right? And so, just as Tammy was saying, I mean, there are more than enough people who would be happy for younger folks to sit down and shut up and to not have a perspective or an opinion on things. But you deserve that. That is your right as an American citizen. Why throw that away? Do not throw away your voice. Let them know what you think. And how you're going to do that is by voting.
And I would add to that, especially on local elections, because the numbers of people voting are higher in the presidential elections, and then they drop for the off-year elections. And that's the place where you as the individual are closest to those that are representing you. And that's where you have your voice, and your vote even has more power, I would argue, is on that local election. So you really got to show up for those.
Yeah. And on that same note, run for local election. You guys, like, there ain't nothing stopping you. Like, get yourself on that ticket. You go run. And I had a friend actually when I was in college who ran for the San Marcos City Council. He was 18 years old and he ran for San Marcos City Council, did not win, but he ran. And how amazing was that? And he would have been fantastic on the city council had he won. And like, you know, you guys, you have so much political power. Let's use it. Let's use it.
Definitely. Yeah.
I love that. Well said.
Sorry, I yell.
It's okay.
I'm a yeller.
Thanks for sharing your spirit, Doctor Who.
No,
My
but
poor students in class, like I'm literally like yelling at them like all the time.
But to go off of what you were saying, in high school, I had a history teacher who was explaining that, and somebody had said, "I'm not going to vote. I just find it, you know, I don't understand it. I don't believe in that." And my teacher turns around and she's like, "I don't understand this. Like, it's, your voice should be heard." And she's like, "You know what? Believe what you want, but you're making my voice be heard." And I was just like, wow, she just had so much emotion to it. So I believe it. You're right.
Other people's silence intensifies other people's voices and makes them louder.
Yeah.
And then it has that ripple effect in policy and other decisions that can impact generations. So that's a problem. Yeah.
It's just my turn. But some of your answers already answered my questions. So oh no. So what are some opinions and thoughts about women's suffrage?
You want to take it?
I think as a modern feminist, my concerns now, besides seeing younger voices show up in bigger numbers, and looking to leaders like Stacey Abrams, who's been working on fixing voting issues. She's like a fantastic role model, I think, for any woman, any person wanting to get involved in politics and how to really make a difference. But after that, I think I look more globally and looking at societies and worlds where women's voices are still silenced, still devalued. And we can see, sadly, similar patterns that American women suffered through, and Western European women as well, happening in other parts of the country. And how can we contribute to helping change their situations? And for me, it always usually goes back to women's education and educational opportunities for girls and for children as a whole in lots of parts of the country. So I do still believe that education is that core piece that opens up the opportunities and can equip women to fight as well, some of the fights that they're going to have in their own worlds. So.
Along those same lines, the real, I think, power and importance of women participating in the political system is that allows women to help set the agenda. And if you don't have access to the political system, the issues that matter to you and that impact your life will never make it necessarily to the political agenda. Like take, for example, the issue of, this is actually an issue in national politics right now, over whether or not childcare is infrastructure. And I would argue, and many female politicians are arguing, yes, in fact, childcare is very much infrastructure, because historically and socially, women contribute more to childcare. They also contribute more to elder care and home care than do their male counterparts. And so this means then that if we want women in the workforce and we want to grow the workforce, we have to provide the kind of infrastructure necessary that makes it possible for women to go out and get jobs. And if you have to, and like this is my case right now too, is I have a little baby. I would not be able to teach my classes or grade my students' work if I had to provide all of her childcare all by myself. Like if I didn't have help, I would not be able to keep my job. But I'm very lucky and I have help. And childcare is extremely expensive. And so like, here's the thing, like, it is women's participation and women's access to the political realm and the setting of the political agenda that creates the conditions whereby women can get the things that they need in order to be, fully functioning members of society. Like, you know, if you need a job, you need that childcare help to go and do that. And right now, that's a really big issue on the national level, because there's this debate over whether or not childcare is infrastructure. And I would 100% argue, as many female politicians are right now, that it is infrastructure.
I love it.
Yeah.
So how has your life been impacted by having a voice regarding this topic? Do you like having a voice in this matter?
Yeah.
I mean, of course.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
I would say absolutely, but sadly, I would also say too that there's repercussions to having a strong female voice still. Whether you're in academia, corporate America, society in general, though there's changes that have occurred, it's still not acceptable in all areas. And you can hear that sometimes. Is she the bossy, aggressive person, or is she really speaking her mind on the political issue? I can't speak for Morgan, but most women that are in my circle and my sisters and friend groups have experienced discrimination, harassment in one form or another because of their voices, because they were women. It can be from simple things to how you're dressed and perceived, to your hair being tied back and the makeup not being on, to not smiling. I don't think we've ever heard our male colleagues be told to smile, right? I'm not saying at our school, but out in corporate America, like smile and the whole thing. So there's still repercussions for women, still issues that we're addressing, and there's still a push to silence it. And I think the scariest one always is kind of like the same argument we see with race. Oh, we have a woman who's VP. We have equality now. You've had the right to vote since 1919. You're equal.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really dealing with how our systems have built sexism, racism, classism, all of these things into our laws, our processes, our way of thinking, and how are we going to rip them all out, eradicate all of them, and replace them so that people don't sit and wonder why childcare or elder care is really infrastructure, and how that impacts women. Why are so many people amazed that the pandemic is having huge impact primarily on women within the households? That we're really working triple, quadruple duties, working our jobs, taking care of homes, educating children, and trying to help our family, extended family members. I'm not saying that men aren't suffering too, because I know they are, but the amount of it coming down on women specifically is huge, and the toll has been deep, I would think. So there's consequences sometimes still for the voice. And therefore, my greatest advice to all women, whatever their cause, whatever their issue, is to network with other women, especially like Dr. Who will be your cheerleader, who will support you in your cause, who are a girl's girl, is what we would say. Even if they may not agree with you and where you're going, they may agree with your voice, your choice to go for it, and can back you up and support you in those ways, and who may have connections for you, who may have skills that you don't have and they have them, and resources. Networking is just so important, I think, for strong women to stay strong and to stay sane. So network for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
And my last question real fast. With everything going on in politics today, what if the 19th Amendment changed, allowing women to no longer have a voice? How would you feel?
Riot.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking that too, Morgan. I was like, yeah, I don't think I would be at home. I think I would be out marching, and I've been out marching in women's marches on other issues, but I would certainly be out marching on that one. And I'm willing to march for women in other countries on it. So I wouldn't take that one lightly, to say the least. Morgan? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, largely because there has been sort of it's just sort of like an internet like meme backlash. So it's not a really serious social or political movement. But sort of there's been some folks on like some, dark corners of the internet who actually have been making this argument, largely because there's sort of a gender split where more women tend to vote for the Democratic Party and more men tend to vote for the Republican Party. And so there's been, some sort of like, hushed campaigns where people are like, oh, women shouldn't even have the right to vote and things like that. And I mean, at this point, women are more than half of the U.S. population. I don't think you could roll that back, even if if anyone really wanted to in a serious way. But absolutely, if something were to happen where, my political rights or the political rights of other folks were to get stripped away, out in the streets, that's how you make that known.
Yeah, I think you would have to. And I think that's why women have always allied with a lot of other groups. We've definitely been flawed in our movement. Going back historically, our own issues with race and class divisions within our own movement that we still need to continue to address as modern women. But I think you have to stand up for all voices. It can't be just some. It's all or it's nothing. Yeah. And that includes all men. It includes all women. It doesn't matter their political persuasion. And that unity is what I would like to see American society in general perhaps come together on. That is the big umbrella of the U.S. Constitution that's supposed to unite us as Americans. That right to it, even though we have a long history of trying to keep certain voices out. we've come so far. To go backwards now would be detrimental. But I was thinking while Doctor Who was speaking about Handmaid's Tale. I mean, that was kind of the vision, if you've seen that TV series or read that book, that comes to mind. And why so many modern women, I think, are attracted to that literature and the film series. To imagine what would that world look like again, and it would be pretty ugly to most of us. So,
I agree.
yeah,
100%.
ugly.
Well, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for joining us, and thank you to our audience for watching.
Thank you
Please
guys so much.
make sure you're liking the video and subscribing, and we'll see you guys next time.